Friday, everyone. It is Friday, so you know what that means. Brand new shows, Because Cannabis, Wayward Media, wayward.media on your interwebs. Please subscribe. Give us a subscribe down below. Click that little button because that means Dustin Kava, my co-host, BC Wayman, we're here for you every Friday. Brand new episodes talking cannabis in an interesting way, talking new kind of found conversations, highbrow conversations, sometimes about low-end topics, all sorts of things in between. Our kind of cannabis show. Lots of cannabis shows out there talking very specific aspects of the cannabis industry, of which, Dustin, we're going to talk a very specific aspect of the cannabis industry today, so I'm excited to do that. We've had a interesting set of guests between doctors and scientists. Now we're going into cultivators, engineers, lighting specialists, right? One of those things, one of those major points of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, where people get obsessed with when it comes to cultivation, right? It's water, it is the kind of soil, and then it's the lighting. Like those three things I feel like are all of the main pieces people obsess over. And so today, lighting, we're going to talk lighting. Does that like excite you in general? I'm like, Dustin, I booked a guest. We're going to talk all about LED lights for 60 minutes. First reaction when you saw the email.
You know what? Honestly, LEDs are like, have been one of my favorite things for 20 years. But when it came to growing, I was instantly just like, wow, I really know absolutely nothing. Not one fucking thing. And I there's something to that I'm so excited. I've used them in every other prototype that we've ever done in some way, shape, or form. But growing with them is something I've never. And so I'm genuinely pretty excited about this to learn some more.
It's interesting, right? And we'll get our guest, Greg Selby of Scynce LED, on here in just a minute to talk about that, right? It is something that the commercial grower still tends to use a lot of ceramic halide lights. They really haven't adapted. LEDs had struggled with the power. LEDs had struggled with the UV, and it struggles sometimes with the light coverage. But that's something that Scynce LED has hoped to figure out. So we'll bring Greg here in just a second. Real quick, everyone, you know the drill. Follow us socially at MEETWM, MEETWM, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to the channel, Wayward Media. Check us out. We got Anthony Trav doing game content, streaming through, trying to beat World of Warcraft on there. Dustin and I hosting Because Cannabis. Got a few other things in the works. So check us out. We really appreciate it. Hit that subscribe. We're growing. All right, Dustin, let's brighten the mood, right? Let's brighten the mood. And the best way to brighten the mood, the best way to light up a room is to bring in a lighting specialist. Is that what you would classify yourself as, Greg Selby from Scynce LED? Like when you have your business card, I know it's like director of cultivation for Scynce LED, but like what in your soul, like what are you really good at? Is it lighting or what's the really good thing? Maybe it's nothing to do with cannabis and light. Maybe it's art, guitar music. What really is your soul, Greg Selby?
By trade, I'm a soil ecologist. So I spent most of my days digging around in the soil. I used to do a lot of climate change studies, education outreach for soil sciences, for that sort of thing, trying to get out to the community, teach people about science. So first of all, I called myself a teacher. And I think that falls a lot into where we are with the lighting industry on my side of the world too, is teaching people about the LEDs, how to use them. Like you said, people are just starting to adapt this technology. So yeah, so I think a teacher probably at heart, but a soil ecologist and a lighting, I would not go as far as to call myself an expert, but I'm doing what I can.
I think you got to be right there. It is, as we were saying at the intro, Greg, it's one of those things, right? Dustin and I, kind of casually in our own ways involved in the cannabis cultivation. Dustin a little closer than me. I work, though, at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. As I've talked on the show, I teach a class about commercial cultivation operations from a very business-centric side of it. And as I was saying at the beginning, there's three things that people seem, new growers that I have learned in the last 6-7 years, obsess over, right? It's water, it's soil, and it's lighting. There's lots of other pieces that have to grow into a commercial grow, all sorts of other equipment and operations, but it's those three things that really seem to people obsess on. And so you're kind of in one of those tenets. I know you come from a commercial background. When you were there, is something that you obsessed with was lighting and it led to this? Or why, if you started in kind of soil, how did the transition from soil, commercial grower, which we'll dig into in a few minutes, to lighting, not quite expert, but close to it, come about?
Sure. Oddly enough, I'm old school enough that HPS was my only option. Maybe you'd throw the CMHs up. Yeah, for years I was stuck with the one spectrum I was stuck with, and I moved to a grow in Oregon and started with Fluence LEDs, and immediately loved the technology that the LEDs brought to the table. But I ran into some issues as a classic cultivator right away. There's enough changes that need to be made moving to LED from those old school HID fixtures that I ran into some problems right away. And so great working with Fluence, was really turning out nice crops. And the problems that I was having kind of led me to discover Scynce LED and what they were doing. Coming from soil ecology, I got into cannabis mostly as an IPM guy, just because I knew the bugs, I knew the systems. So a lot of the LEDs don't really help you out on the IPM side too much. A lot of them can't get sprayed. A lot of them can't get wet. So Scynce brought a lot to the table that I was really interested in, and we started working together, and I was lucky enough for them to bring me on board.
Oh, Dustin, did you mute yourself? I'm going to call you out right now. Really? This is what happens. We take like a week off. I see him shaking his head, Greg. You think? We've done, I don't know, 15 of these shows. We've done a ton of shows together. I don't edit this, by the way, either, especially if you're going to make a mistake like that, Dustin. We got a guest on here. We got a science expert, like a super smart man, and we can't unhit mute. We've all done it, though. I mean, let's be real. I call you out, but I've done it all the time.
Yeah.
I hear all that, but all I'm thinking about is Greg right out of high school. And I'm thinking, did Greg, did you actually like enter? I know you got your degree from the University of Colorado, right?
Colorado State University. My degrees actually are from University of Northern Colorado, which is one town over. But I worked for Colorado State University for about 15 years after I got my degree there.
Was it always the ambition to work with cannabis, or was there other ambitions, and it was college that actually kind of steered the direction there a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it was a roundabout way. I went to college, knowing I was going to be a biologist. I was definitely that Colorado hippie, 100% through and through. And started working. I did a lot of my research was in the field. So most of my early career was living in tents in crazy places around the world and around the country. But every time I'd come home to Colorado, we were just starting to open up the medical market. So the Western slope in Colorado was coming wide open on big outdoor soil grows. So it quickly became a passion and where I spent a lot of my time. So it started off with the bugs and the plants and the animals. And then, once I figured out I could make a living doing what I loved, then I just kept going.
Let's break that. I got to break that down for a second. All right, explain to me, because I've had it explained a couple times, but I still don't always grasp it. Let's break down soil food web. So I make sure, like on a grade school level, Greg, like I really need sometimes, like on a grade school level, break down soil food web so I can truly appreciate what you know so well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So basically, the basic levels, bacteria, fungus, those are your two main drivers of any soil system. The bacteria have a tendency to turn things a little faster. You're all familiar with bacterial growth. It goes fast, it's rapid. So it really changes those nutrients over really quick. Fungal-based systems a little slower. It takes a little more time for them to break things down, but both basically churning that detritus, that leftover leaf material, whatever nitrogen, carbon fixation needs to happen. And then the soil web builds up from there. So you get the base of the food web is, the cattle, all the little stuff, all the nematodes, everything. And then everything up from there all the way to spiders. It's a really complex system. So you can get anything from like a cave system where you're deep underground. There's not a lot of inputs. It's a real basic system. It's basically an ABC, all the way up to something like an old growth rainforest where those caveats in between are massive. So a lot of my time in my scientific research was spent in cave systems and in the Arctic deserts, where it's a smaller system. So you can make slight tweaks, like add a little more nitrogen, add a little more carbon. How does that change how this system functions? How does the system kind of fall apart and stay together based on how that works? And then we did a lot of modeling. So that's where we got into a lot of the climate change stuff, is we do slight shifts to the Arctic soils, see where we were headed. But basically, it's just like any other food web. The more complex, the more stable it is. The less complex, the more you pull one thing out and it kind of collapses. But fungal and bacterial based, and then it's all about soil size, pore size, what the soil's made of from there. So it's a hard system to break down to easy level.
I just keep thinking the impossible task of collecting that data, and not only once you get that data, putting it to use in some way, making sense of the 10,000 page spreadsheet.
Yep.
What is it? is it the getting your hands dirty that you enjoy, or is it, going through the data and really seeing what the difference is and how to, really fine tune something that kind of gets you going?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm definitely hands in the dirt guy. Always have been. Get me out in the field digging holes. I love to be outside. But the data analysis on the other end, I was lucky enough that my lab, I actually ran the lab at Colorado State, the Natural Resource Ecology Laboratory. One of my labs was the main soil lab there. But I was lucky enough to work with great people in stats that could run all that data analysis and everything. I just collected the data and then handed it off. I was the guy that identified the bugs, counted the bugs, found out how much bacteria, cells, all that kind of stuff, did the extractions, and then I let the data teams run with the rest of it. So I was lucky enough to run a staff of about 6 people in my lab that we did most of the extractions from the soil. I mean, getting the soil is just the beginning of it. It's another month and a half of extractions from there to get everything back out of it. And the team would do all the analysis. And the nice thing and the bad thing about soil ecology is it's a pretty rudimentary science still. I mean, the best way to see what's there is to find it, mark it, say you counted it. There's some genetic stuff and testing that you can do that gets a little more complicated, but it's a lot of floating soil. We don't like to use the dirt word. That's a 4-letter word, so we don't say dirt.
Heard that. I've learned that, by the way. I've had 2 or 3 people. I have something, once again, in the last, coming into this with a very business-centric mindset, as I started to delve into this world, I would often say dirt. And it's kind of like when you say, once again, in our industry, maybe say weed or something like that. Everyone's like, it's cannabis. And then you say dirt, and they're like, what? What'd you say? And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? Like, what did I say? Like, it's soil. I'm like, whoa, all right. I get your don't be so aggressive. But there is a difference, right? The difference between the dirt on the ground and a finely crafted recipe of perfect nutrients, minerals, and, organic material that make an ideal growing condition.
Exactly. What I like to say is dirt is misplaced soil. Dirt is, that's the thing I like to say about it. But yeah, no, I mean, soil systems are very complex. And, like I said, you look at it, even here in Arizona, which most people see as a desert, if I take 10 grams of soil and run that through our extractors, normally it's passive extractors floating it through water, heating the lamp at the top will chase all the bugs out of the soil system, that kind of stuff. Real easy ways to do these extractions. But I mean, you get massive amounts of life out of a small amount of soil. And most people don't realize how much life is actually everywhere they tread. So the base of the soil food web, which a lot of people are going to see in their grow rooms, common name for them is springtails, the collembola, kind of the cattle of the whole food web. They're everywhere. They're in fish tanks. They're in your plants around your home. They're just everywhere you could be. So a lot of this stuff that's the base of the soil food web is in your carpet. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And we are lucky enough to not think about it all the time.
I have a random question that I could only ask you because you're an expert in this field. And we definitely want to talk about what Scynce LED is doing, Scynce LED with Greg Selby. The moon soil story that just broke in the news, that we grew organic material from dirt or soil from the moon. Is that real news, fake news? Should I care about that? Does that mean anything, Greg? Like when you see that's for someone like you're like, it's either been there, done that, or oh my gosh, is that exciting? Because it makes me a little excited. I'm big into UFOs and aliens. I like all that stuff, but I also don't believe them. It's a weird thing. Like I'm excited, but I don't believe. So
this is a very rudimentary topic. I haven't died. I saw that.
I just read a headline, Greg. So I'm just
that's where I'm at too. I don't know any more about it than that. I won't lie to you. I did work with NASA when I was a soil ecologist, so it wouldn't surprise me. We still work with NASA now with Scynce. We work with Bruce Bugbee, who works with NASA. So we're still involved with them. But I actually used to do spider surveys down here in Arizona when I lived in Colorado, collecting spiders. We'd give them to NASA and they'd shoot them into space and see if they could make them do stuff with their webs. And so, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
I need to hear more about this. I definitely.
Hold on a second. We are shooting. Hold on. I feel like there's a lot of conspiracy theories I've heard, and no one's ever gone down the rabbit hole of all these spiders that are getting shot into space in the arachnid apocalypse that we are about to cause.
Yeah. Exactly,
have you not seen sci-fi? Those things nest out there. 1,000 years later, we are attacked by an army of spiders that Greg Selby from Scynce LED shot into the air. I'm blaming you.
I mean, I may be responsible. Hopefully, they're all dead at this point. But those and tardigrades. Tardigrades. I don't know if you're familiar with water bears. They're
amazing.
A lot of those in space. We shoot all that kind of stuff in space. No, the funny thing about spiders is they use gravity to source where they're going to build their webs. So if you change where the gravity's pulling from, you could actually get them to make designs. Like if you want to make them like, make weird patterns and stuff with their webs, you can change the gravity. So you had to be in a zero grav situation to do that. So they were on the space station doing a bunch of crazy studies.
That's super awesome.
Oh, I mean, who knows? If there is a spider invasion 10 years from now, give me a call. We'll see what happens. Let's see if I can help you out.
I don't know. Well, actually, I want to get into Scynce LED because I was listening to a couple shows you had did in the past, and I'd really dive deep into your site and stuff like that. And so I want to kind of know what happened. How did it go from thinking about soil to thinking about the lights and what that actually looks like as a product, not just a service. Well, and that I wanted to bring up too, is that the way you look at it is kind of like a service too. It's this concept of you're really honing into the client. And I really want to go dive deep into that too. But yeah, dirt to light, soil to light. What's the transition there? No. So, I mean, basically it was moving into commercial cultivation when I came in from outside and started doing indoor grows, seeing the challenges that they were coming up against. And a lot of those are soilless. A lot of them are rock wool based or hydro based or cocoa, which, you can make an argument either way if that's soil or not. But a lot of them, it kind of took me out of those soil systems as an IPM person. I had to start setting up artificial biology to, keep pests at bay and everything else. So I got really interested there. And about a year into my first indoor cultivation job, you do the yearly reports on, how you're doing around the grow and everything else. And the one thing my boss told me I needed to improve was my understanding of lighting, because I had zero clue. Light goes on, plants grow. I was a sun guy, so I didn't really concern me.
You really took that to heart then.
Yeah, I took it to heart. I have a tendency to do that. Yeah.
From their boss as seriously as Greg. He was like, you know what? I'm going to go so deep. I'm going to leave here and go work for another company about freaking lights. I'm just saying, that is employee of the month. He doesn't even realize it, but you went. He was like, you should learn a little more. You're like, done. Yeah, exactly.
Check. So I just started diving in deep. And you start learning, what lighting can really do. Luckily, about the time I started diving in deep, we were kind of coming out of with the blurple days of LED, where everything was at kind of bluish red spectrum, which is a super efficient spectrum for growing plants. And actually that was designed by NASA to grow plants in space because it's the least amount of energy to grow the most amount of plant product. But what the cannabis industry was seeing is we just weren't getting the results we wanted out of those. We weren't getting the weight we were getting out of HPS. We weren't getting the terpene profiles, all that kind of stuff. So we started seeing these new LEDs coming online with more of this full spectrum hit. So right around then, right when I started getting the LEDs, they were really becoming usable as a fixture in cultivation, and just happened to start getting put into R&D programs with my research background. The one thing I can tell you, I work with a lot of cultivators nowadays, and my job is to do the research with them, and not a lot of cannabis cultivators have that research background. So when somebody hears you're a cannabis cultivator and you know how to do research and you've had white papers published, they tend to grab at you a little bit more. So my background kind of pushed me into those R&D programs. And from there, it was learning that not every medium, reacts the same to the same spectrums of light. You might want something different for an organic soil grow than you do for a high EC salt application. And cannabis being as variable as it is, you might have one strain that really likes this and one strain that really likes that. So I started pulling that all apart, and you started to see that it wasn't a one-size-fits-all situation. And that was about the time I met the guys over at Scynce, and they were working with this great technology that they actually brought from their first business was off-road lighting, rigid LED. So really big lights for trucks and that stuff that threw far into the desert. And they took that technology with the lenses, and I'm sure we'll jump into that later. And then they also had another company that did stage lighting, which did quick changes for like SNL. And, if you needed a color change quick on a set, that they had the controls for that. And they married those two. And they were just starting to get into horticulture when I got with them. We were at their second gen of lights. So just kind of went from there on, research and what we could do, and got deeper and deeper every year.
Is it mostly, is your business mostly cannabis? Is there other, I know other people use the LED lights for growing and such, but it seems to be, even given the name of some of the products on Scynce LED, some of them have cannabis puns to them, Raging Kush, the light fixture. Was it always kind of the cannabis marketplace, or was it just grow lighting and then the cannabis kind of said, we love this, and you just said, let's go all in? Like, what came first, the light or the cannabis?
So the light came first. Our first design of these lights was for rack style growing for microgreens, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But being made in the U.S. and having this technology all on board of our lights, our pricing is a little bit different than a lot of the $500 LEDs you get from overseas, China. So we had to have a high price per pound crop, right? And so cannabis obviously is that right now. But yeah, we work with everybody across the board. I mean, really with our spectrum tuning technology and the variability of cannabis, we're really an ideal match for them. But we work with green producers because there's a lot of stuff you can do with these spectrums on expressing anthocyanins in lettuce. So like purple lettuces that are a little more money per pound, they really love our lights. We're seeing a lot of strawberry cultivators moving indoors and really applying a far red technology to spread out their strawberry crops for better airflow and stuff. So we're getting them kind of coming in now, and strawberry prices per pound have been going up and up with everything going on in the country. So, but cannabis for the most part, we have our raging kale that was kind of designed to be our small kind of veg light, and that's a great cannabis veg light as well. And then the raging kush was specifically designed for cannabis growers because it's got a high PPFD in a blend. And then our Dragon Alpha, which is our greenhouse light, that's an application for really anybody that's kind of replacing an HID setup or greenhouse grow.
So you're manufacturing, it's manufactured in the States, you said, correct?
It is. Yep.
Wow. When I was actually looking for manufacturers of LEDs in the States, and there's not many.
Not a lot of us, no.
So, that was one of the very first things I was looking for, and I didn't see it screamed at me anywhere on anything. And so it's really surprising, but it also says to me that, we are looking at a 10-year, 25-year cycle with them easily without an issue. And we are, there's a lot of certain standards that are just exponentially better here right now that I have never, it's hard to find. But my question deals with this talk of this concept of recipes, as much as, I've heard people sell soil recipes for $10,000, for cultivators. And I'm thinking about, how you guys are thinking about recipes in terms of the light, in terms of, as the amount of sun and the way the sun looks and the way just every spectrum of light that it's producing when it first comes up in the morning, as opposed to throughout the rest of the day. And just, what exactly, when you talk about recipes, is it just the amount of light and when, or is it a lot more nuanced?
So when it comes to cannabis, it's a unique plant. It can take a ton of light. It's a very happy and a lot of sun plants. So what we like to talk about is your U moles per day, your DLI, your daily light integral. How much light the plant's receiving. So cannabis can take a ton of it. PPFD levels, when we talk about the flux levels, how much photons the plants are receiving. The sun puts out about 2,000 is what we talk about, when you're looking at, you're about 2,000 PPFD. A lot of even the older HID lights are around 1,000 PPFD. So cannabis can take a ton of light. And what we're seeing in cannabis, especially with the research that Bruce Bugby's doing at Utah State University with high PPFD studies, is that the more light you put on the plant, the more yield you're going to get. There seems to be a direct correlation between those two things. So PPFD, the amount of light's always going to be your main driver. What we've run into over the years is we know that spectrums can affect the morphology of plants. That's been tested time and time again, any plants, especially cannabis. But you have to have those high light levels. So what Scynce has managed to do with their technology is be able to bring you those spectrum shifts and maintain that level of PPFD. Nobody else on the market can do that besides us. That's patented tech that we have. Anybody else that does spectrum tuning, you're turning on and off channels of the LED. So you can shift the spectrum, but you're losing power. So for a long time, spectrum really didn't matter to the cannabis community because it was like, I need more weight. But with this technology, for the first time, we can do the research and say, no, the spectrum is what's actually getting you more terpene production, spreading those nodes out because we're at that maintained PPFD level. So that's really the main driver of cannabis on all fronts is PPFD. So when it comes to our recipes, what we're learning and what we're kind of pulling apart is are there certain triggers that these plants are responding to that can speed up crop times, that can, if you're a hash washer, what spectrum is going to work for me to produce more hash If you're doing for edibles or something else, what gives me more biomass? Where do we really tweak that to get that last step for you? We know the light's there. We got you the amount of light you need. Now, how do we dial you in for success for your cultivar? Like if I say something, my example that I always use is Jack Herrera. That's a strain that pretty much everybody's pretty familiar with. It's an old school strain that was, bred and raised in the backwoods of Northern California, normally under a lot of pine trees, back canopy crop, kind of out of the way of prying eyes. So when that went indoors, everybody was like, the strain's impossible to grow. I'm throwing it under these 1,000-watt HPSs and the thing's not performing like it did for me in the soil. It's getting all the light it needs. It's not performing well. So I did the same thing. I got my Jack Herrera, threw it under my LEDs, and I fried it. Just miserable, the plant was. So we figured out, hey, well, let's try putting shade cloth over it because we didn't have dimmers on the LEDs at the time. So we ran it with shade cloth. Plant loved it. So when I got to Scynce, what simulates those shade kind of spectrums is a 730 nanometer. Well, Scynce has an individual channel for 730 nanometers. So instead of having to lose all my light, I can just turn up that shade component and now my plant's happy. That same plant might not respond. A different cultivar might not respond the same way to that amount of shade. So there's a lot of genetic influence in our plants in the cannabis world. So it's really important to kind of know your background, how close you are to land race. If you are running land race, is it used to more UV? Is it less UV? Is it used to more shade, not shade? So these adjustments, these little tweaks can get you, that last little bit that you're trying to, get over the goal line with.
So what is then the pitch? Like, so what is the difference, right? There's some information, when you head over to the website, scynceled.com, that talks about it, but just sell me to, what's the difference? What is Scynce LED? Well, we talked about optics, some of the lenses, you walk into a meeting, you got a grower who's like, I don't like your LEDs, Greg.
Sure.
What do you say in that, obviously without giving away the secrets, though you can feel free, we don't care, not our money. What are, give me the sales pitch. Why Scynce LED opposed to, I just learned this totally Googled this. It's as opposed to, you got to use all three of those together when you're referencing. As opposed to, we're learning together, English and lights, as opposed to whatever else I was referencing that I forgot when I started.
Sure, yeah, as opposed to normally bare diode boards. That's mostly what we talk to. So our big back and forth is LED first better than high intensity discharge lights? That's an easy thing to answer already because they're more efficient. And now that we're getting the power where it needs to be, we're good. We can get the penetration level. Back in the day with the LEDs, we're not getting the penetration. Our top nugs are growing great, but our bottom nugs aren't. So our first pitch normally is we solve that with our optic lenses. We have two types of lenses. We have a 120-degree optic, and what that does, that's on the Raging Kale and the Raging Kush, and that actually allows you to get the plants within 9-12 inches of the fixture without bleaching or burning the buds, so you can get them a lot closer. So if you're in a racking situation, you can get that BPFD further into the canopy and still get those plants nice and close to the lights. Okay. Our 70-degree optic, which is a linear optic, is on our higher bay Dragon Alpha, our greenhouse lights, and that does a similar thing, but it points the lights down, the photons down into the plant a lot more, so you get that penetration from that level. So the first thing that we kind of got at with our lenses and our optics is a diffuse light, a penetrative light that kind of acts like a greenhouse light that really takes you from that, like a lot of A and B bud, maybe some C, to all A, all the way down your plant. Okay. So we're maybe not turning up how much weed you're growing, but we're turning up how much of it is A quality. So Scynce is all about getting you that quality. Weight's great. We want to get you great, but we want that top shelf product coming out of your grow. So that's the first thing we throw at them. Secondarily, the optics also bring to the game is our lights are all IP66 completely sealed. So a lot of LEDs on the market, our quantum boards, bare diode boards, they do like a light conformal coating over the diodes. If you've ever been in a grow room, they are not dry environments.
So wet, moist, stinky place. If you've ever if you ever wanted to work there, when you walk inside, you're like, well, maybe not, because it is wet and stinky.
Yeah, exactly. So, and a lot of IPM sprays. My background in IPM, a lot of treatments. There's a lot of chlorine treatments that just break down these LED boards and lights over time. So completely sealed. If you get on YouTube, you can watch us run one in a pool. We're spectrum tuning it underwater. So there's that great seal, 5-year warranty. Lights are pretty bulletproof compared to a lot of the other LEDs on the market. And then you get into that recipe tuning. We like to call it future proof. Our friends over at Lux LED, they work really close with the Jungle Boys. They do a lot of great R&D work, and they just came out with a brand new spectrum that they swear up and down is the best new veg spectrum. They've done all the testing, and I think that's great. Any sort of science that the community's doing that we're getting good stuff off of. Well, when we come out with those new spectrums, we don't want to have to sell you a whole nother light. We're interested in you really succeeding with our fixtures. So shift it. Let's check out that new thing. We got your diodes in here already, right? So we like to call it future proof. We're always going to have the tech. Cannabis science is really young. We have a lot of work to do. We got some stuff coming in from Canada right now. We got some stuff from overseas that's been really good, but it's still a real young science. So to assume we know everything about cannabis lighting right now would be a bit naive. So what we're trying to do is make sure you have any and all options that you want down the road to make sure that you're successful with what your business goes towards. Because some people might start out in soil, and then realize that's going to be too much labor, and they work their way down to rock wool. You might need a different light, at that point than you did when you were growing soil. So we want to just make sure we're adaptive. We're really about breaking that whole paradigm with LEDs where you're going to need a new light every 2 years, A, because they're breaking down, and B, because there's a new best spectrum on the market. We're going to give you all the tools we know work and let you use them where you need to apply it.
Oh man, now there has to be a drawback. There has to, is it more of something else, more water, or is it more like, what is there a drawback to using the LEDs?
Drawbacks, sure. It's more adjustments. So HIDs are really good at giving out a lot of extra heat. I think I don't remember off the top of my head, but something like 70% of the energy is lost to heat. It's 30% of it's actually produced to light. So you're wasting a lot of energy just heating those things up. So that normally has an IR and infrared aspects to it that heats up your leaf temperature. That's going to warm up your room, so you're running your AC a lot more, right? So when you switch over to LEDs, what you notice is you're running a cooler room. So it has a tendency you're not running your AC as much. So now your room's not drying out as much. It's staying a little more humid. On that note, LEDs like to run the room a little more humid because a lot of the LEDs have this really heavy blue spectrum weighted in there because it's a really photosynthetically viable spectrum to have that blue. That's kind of where that blurple color came from. A lot of blue and a lot of red. Those are your two most efficient light wavelengths to use to grow plants. But that blue component, what that does is it has a tendency to grow. The leaves have more stoma on them, what actually transpires on the plant. So there's more stoma, more pores, and then they're bigger. So you have a tendency to draw through a lot more water through the plants. So your rooms get more humid. So really a lot of the drawbacks that you'll hear is like, well, I'm not using my AC as much to cool my room. So my humidity's running away rampant. And now my dehue's running 24 hours a day. So I've undersized my dehue for my LED rooms. So you get that a lot. The nutrient uptake goes up. Because you're dragging that much water through the plants, there's more nutrients coming through too. So if you are a salt-based cultivator or somebody that's doing a lot of fertilizers, you'll see that use go up a little bit. But that normally also, results in more yield. So the big pushback on LEDs is the upfront cost because we're a lot more expensive than an HID light. Those are getting cheaper by the day. But the ROI over time for your energy use and everything catches right back up with you, within a couple of runs. And then when you get into somebody like Scynce and a couple of the other companies that are working on how to speed up crop times and stuff, if we can get you an extra turn every year, that's money in the bank right there. So
yeah, absolutely.
So it's instead of calling it, it's a learning curve. You have to relearn how to grow, and that's really what happens with a lot of the pushback. Is you get these guys that have been using HIDs for a long time. They throw up two LEDs in a room. They don't change any of their environmentals. They don't change their fertilizing practices, and they're like, these things suck. I can't grow anything with these. Well, you have to tweak everything. You're changing. If you look at the 9 parameters, there's 7 or 9 parameters depending on who you talk to on what plant growth really consists of. Light's always the biggest one. That's always your biggest force, and it's either going to be your limiting factor or it's going to be the factor that's driving everything else, that's pacing it out. So light changes every aspect of what you have to add. And so making these more complex spectrums changes how you grow. Limiting your spectrums changes how you grow. So it's a give and take.
How has it been? You obviously just hearing you talk, hearing you, being very passionate about it, hearing you drop science bombs left and right, just knowledge and facts about lighting. Clearly, I think when you were a grower, it was some of the data coming from a research background that it clearly excited you and such. But we have an industry that I think as you said, it's early on, and we're kind of still trying to be old school, Wild West, off the radar, especially some of these growers. And you have some people who are like, yes, there are very excited about the sciences, and people like Jungle Boys, like, hey, if I tweak, just a couple, meters on this thing, I can find, 0.6. And the other people are like, look, man, I can just put a seed in the ground outside in the California, and it's going to grow. Like, I'm going to get it. How has it been in your dealings with the older school cultivators who are like, look, I don't need your fancy equipment here, versus kind of the science-minded? Are we trending more science-minded cultivators, or is there a battle coming where eventually we'll have a civil war between the OGs and the not OGs? Like, what is that like behind the scenes and dealing with it? Because I'm curious, because I think it's what happens is an industry grows up like this. It's like a band, right? It's like your favorite band who gets big, and you're like, I don't want my people to learn about my band. Right. And then you're excited that they're big, but they're like, damn it, everyone knows about my favorite band and I can't get into the show, right? It's that kind of thing. So you deal directly with a lot of cultivators. You talk about the sales pitches. The old schoolers are like, I don't need your lights because they don't work. What is that like, really behind the scenes? Are we trending towards this really science heavy? Are the nerds taking over cannabis, or will it be kind of our OG stoners in the back, or just a nice, happy melting pot in between?
Yeah, I think long term we're going to find our nice, happy melting pot, because the outdoor, look, sun-grown quality cannabis. Sun-grown cannabis is quality. It's huge, and if you're doing it right, it's fantastic. I still say the best weed I ever grew was in Southern California in a hoop house. It was light dep, and that was the best weed I've ever grown. The environment was perfect. I didn't have to do anything, and it was super easy. But what we're seeing right now in our industry, and to be completely honest with you, is the MSOs, or the multi-state operators, are really throwing a wrench in the system right now, because they're big money. They're not really in it for the love of the plant. They're there to produce as much as they can produce, and that's the bottom line. And so that's kind of changed the way a lot of the bigger growers are looking at things right now. It's how much plant can I grow, and then our uneducated consumers out there on the market that are looking for high THC numbers. That's pushing us down a path that I'm not that excited about. I'm not really stoked on where that's headed. But what I really always kind of bring it back to is kind of, if you look at that craft beer kind of resurgence that happened in the late 90s, where you went from having Budweiser, Miller, Coors to all these nice craft producers later on. They still only owned 10% of the market share, but it seemed like they were everywhere. What we're getting now is the MSOs are leaning heavy on the science, but they're leaning heavy on the science to see how much they can grow. What's the yield? I don't really care about quality. I'm going to wash it all. I'm going to pump it all out into edibles. I'm going to put it in my vape pens. I don't really care. But then you also have these guys that realize that in order to keep their market share and in order to keep their price per pound up, you're looking at states like California. I think Oklahoma now has more licenses than California does, right?
Well over. Well over.
Yeah.
7,000 compared to about 3,600 is what California has.
Yeah. What happens if we legalize? It's going to be like Oklahoma at a point. Like, it's a fascinating case study in Oklahoma.
Right. It's insane. And when they set that market up, I was growing in Oregon. So I was like, don't do that. You're about to, you're going to be in a world of hurt. But I watched the prices in Oregon when I started working there. We were at $2,400 a pound for quality indoor, down to $800 a pound when I was on the market there. And California's dealing with the same thing now. But what the good craft cannabis producers are seeing is they can maintain their $2,400 or $2,800, $3,200 a pound, because it's quality, and it's the only quality out there. So yeah, we have all these massive producers right now that are just dumping weight into the market. That's, I wouldn't call it subpar. Mids is thrown around quite a bit. There's some quality big growers out there, but they're few and far between. But what we're seeing is since all of the cultivators that have been doing this for 20, 25 years, they're in their craft grow. They're where they're happy, because, as you mentioned, cannabis grow rooms they're not a great work environment. It's not somewhere anybody's itching to be unless they're really in love with the plant, where they're making a lot of money. And we're at a point now where we're in between those two. Head growers aren't getting paid what they used to. So you got to really love what you do to kind of be doing this. And so we're kind of in this thing where all the big old growers, they have their spot already. So what are we getting coming into the industry now? First-year horticulture majors, master's degrees, PhDs. So the science background is coming up huge right now. And that's what MSOs are looking for. That's who they're hiring, because they don't want Johnny smokes 20 pounds a day to come in, and run their facility. Right? Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing about being a cannabis cultivator, especially at a higher level, is you don't manage your plants anymore. You manage your staff. And a lot of growers aren't interested in running a staff of people. It's just not their background. I was lucky enough to come from education background where I was used to managing undergrads, used to managing college grads, and to kind of juggle that. But it's a different job than when you're doing it with 4 tables in a greenhouse on your own. You know, it's just a different look.
Yeah, and I mean, I scream. BC teaches at the Cleveland School of Cannabis, and sometimes I'll do a couple of mentor some of his students and stuff like that. And one of the things I scream is your employees are literally your biggest asset.
Yeah.
And so you go from thinking what I'm growing is the asset, but really it's the team that's kind of that's doing it with you. And so, yeah, if you're not able to make that transition and that shift, you're going to be struggling from day one. Yeah. What exactly, when you talk about, that some of these originally was cores and it originally was some of the, the big guys coming in, and then you had the smaller breweries start, coming in. Are places like Michigan exciting you with their micro grows and the process of growing, processing into oil or edibles, provisioning, and the lounge all under one roof, one license, where you really can have a whole experience catered around each strain, it's a very experience driven thing where it's not always yield. It's like you are already set aside because you control the whole operation in one. And
no, I mean, there's a lot of markets on, and that's the part of the markets that really we're lucky enough at Scynce that we get to talk to, because it's not just blast the light, grow the plant, walk on. We want to make sure our terpene content is here. We want this here. That's these little tweaks you can do with our lights that you can't do with a lot on the market. So luckily, most of the time, that's who I'm talking to. We do work with MSOs. We work with some big MSOs around the country. But the people that really get passionate and really feed me and what we do with our recipes are the little local producers that are like, oh man, I'm growing, this strain that I picked out in the back room, and this light mix works amazing for it. And they'll show me the light mix, and I'm like, well, I can't give that to anybody else. That's specifically for you. So being able to have those little craft experiences, and that's what I love, because that's where, my kind of background always was with medical, patient, and really high quality anything. I'm the same way with the food. It's high quality. I'm all about the quality. I don't need 20 pounds of it. Give me, 1 pound of it and it's quality. And the Michigan market's really great. I honestly have to say I spent a lot of time in Michigan, and I've had some of the best stuff I've ever smoked out of Michigan. It's really great markets. You have some of these new markets coming online where they're encouraging craft. They're not letting the big MSOs. We're the exact opposite in Arizona. Like, it's pay to play here. It's only the big operators.
We're
here.
Ohio
in
too.
Ohio.
I say in Ohio. Yeah.
We have the same thing. You have states like California, Michigan, and Massachusetts, the 3 that have launched their micro business license. Well, at least Michigan and California have, or Massachusetts in the application process. And they're also good. They're giving back to social equity, trying to get more diversity in. But it sounds like Scynce LED is ideal for someone like that who has a smaller operation, because you can do these different crafts and these different light mixtures and stuff. I have this vision, by the way, is Greg Selby from Scynce LED, as you were talking about having these recipes that you can't give out, of some stoner comedy where you break in and you have to get all the magic light recipes from Greg Selby's brain. He's got all these mystical, oh my God, if you want to grow some purple Kush OG, Greg Selby's got the magic light radiation number there. You got all these strains in your head and you're like, I'm not telling you.
I hear recipe, but is it as simple as you're literally taking this recipe, which is a couple data set points, and you're just uploading them via the Bluetooth to the light? Or is it can they be shared between other facilities and stuff like that pretty easily?
Well, would save the combo, right, and send it out, I would think.
Yeah. So with the app, we have I think it's about 25 recipes you can download directly onto the app that we've designed that are good recipes for most people. If you want to change internode stretch, we have an internode tightening recipe. We have the one that we have the most luck with right now that everybody's loving is our combo recipe, we call it. It starts the day off with our blue diodes on only. So it's a cryptochrome activation. What the cryptochromes do in the plant is they make them start breathing. It's kind of the way to tell them to kind of wake up, start transpiring, let's get going. So you get that blue hit first thing in the morning, and that wakes everybody up. Then that does a full sunrise where the light will ramp all the way up through all of our spectrums to full spectrum. The most of your day is full spectrum all day long. And then it ramps back down on a sunset through all the spectrums. And then at the end of the day, we do a phytochrome transition, which is just hitting them with the 730 nanometer. And what that does is it triggers all the plants to go, oh, it's time for bed. All this energy I've produced today, I'm going to run that through my photo systems. We're going to burn that all down, empty that tank out, so we're not leaving anything on the table for the night. So that recipe runs on a cycle. So you're waking them up earlier, you're putting them to bed faster, so they get more downtime to produce all these great sugars and all this stuff that really leads to that terpene and THC. You know, waterfall of effects there. So there's a lot of recipes that we have. We have seasonal recipes. We have any of our competitors on the market. If you want to run their spectrums, we have all those laid out for you. You can download. We have an HPS simulation.
I can't give away all my recipes, but I'll give away my competitors.
Yeah, you could always give away your competitors.
I mean, and back to the variability of our plants. That's the thing about it. That's why it's always hard when somebody's like, "What's the recipe for OG Kush?" I was like, "I don't know if you actually have OG Kush. Did you run it through genetics and make sure that's OG Kush and not something somebody renamed OG Kush? Is your cut of OG Kush the same as your neighbor's cut of OG Kush? No.
God,
so it's too. You can't get that specific with it. You could say, "Hey, this works for cannabis. This is going to work for most plants." Now you need to do your testing at home. We've given you the tools to do that, to figure out what works for your cut. And if you're like, there's a lot of strains over the years that I've had to throw out of my cultivation facilities because they didn't play with my nutrients. They didn't play with my lighting. So I'm not trying to get a staff of 50 people going to figure out how this one plant grows. Trash it. We'll do another one. We don't have to do that anymore. Now that lighting is an input, if you're like, man, my market really wants, green crack, which never exists anymore, but maybe somebody really wants green crack. And I couldn't grow it because it's too long on it takes too long to grow. The spacing's too bad. My trimmers hate trimming it. The spectrums can shift all of that. We can tighten the inner nodes, we can speed up the time. We can pull out petioles for the trimmers, So it brings plants that were kind of dying off in the market kind of back in as a viable commercial crop.
And I mean, I think about attaching this information and to a historic ledger type of situation.
Yeah.
And it's like, why not, along with the genetic information, attach the recipe information to this lineage? It's the whole thing. It's I don't know. What you guys are doing is definitely, I've saw some other companies attempting or had seen some things, but the way you describe it's a hell of a lot more advanced than what a lot of these other assholes are doing. And I definitely—
that's a bold comment right there. I mean, you are really all in on Scynce LED. You should put that on your marketing poster right there, Greg.
The value, I mean, honestly, for those who are passionate enough, this is a tool that grows with them. This is something that pushes them, makes them collect that data. It really, really, I mean, every part of the process, and now there's no excuse for them. It's like, did you collect the data? What are you changing? What are you constantly doing the same fucking thing over and over? And I like that ability that you're able to go back to these guys and say, actually, the accountability is really back on you. Let's tweak this a little bit more. Let's really dial this in a little bit. And there's something about that like, it helps maintain the passion when the passion is there. It really is like a support structure, a tool there, and more than just light. And it's awesome. It is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly, we want to, we're giving you that tool to get that last expression out of what you want. And my team, we have a great team of cultivators and myself, we'll walk you through, what you need to do to get you started. If you're saying, hey, I'm seeing light bleaching here, what do I do? A lot of the light bleaching you see on buds comes from the red spectrum. So if you're starting to see bleaching week 3, week 4, let's just dump some of those reds out. We'll keep that bleaching maintained, So my team deals with that on a daily basis. We get calls in like, hey, I'm getting some burning on this leaf. What can I do to adjust? And we can change everybody around because not everybody can run the same way. Like I was mentioning, I mean, if somebody calls me with an organic grow, I'm going to give them a different set of spectrums than somebody that's calling me with a hydroponic grow because they're fertilizing at a rate that the lights can be on full blast. We can run the blues, we can run the reds, we can go nuts. Where an organic cultivator is going to go, hey, I'm burning my soil out in week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I need to slow all this down. What do I do? Well, maybe we shift some of those blue spectrums out. We get the warmer spectrums in there. We turn down your overall intensity a little bit. We work with you on your humidity. So we really try to make sure that not only do you have the tools you need to succeed, but we're here to give you what we know, to the best of our ability.
What is something like, so if I'm getting ready to get started, right? And I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I've thought about growing in my yard. Maybe I have a home grow in my state and I'm going to have a small indoor grow, or maybe I'm looking into starting up a boutique grow. I'm having trouble whether I go with Scynce LED, which clearly we should, or some other manufacturer who Justin said are not nice people. What is what's like some rookie mistakes? Give me like one or two. You talked about bleaching. Like, what are some common, like really common mistakes that people are making with lighting, regardless of what type they're using? Just kind of 2 or 3 lighting 101 issues that are like, reboot the computer. Like IT 101. If you can't reboot it, go from there. What's a couple reboot the computer steps we're seeing in lighting?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, most of the time what happens is people want to run before they can walk, right? They'll get a plant. It'll be their second plant and they got their light on 100% intensity and they're dumping as much fertilizer on it as they think they need to. So normally it's not only is it lighting based, but a lot of times when we start pulling apart what the problems really are under our lights, it's environment. The pH is off, your RH is really low. Your general temps in your room aren't where they need to be. I mean, that brings in a lot of the pest pressure and stuff as well. I mean, lighting is this component that's kind of drives everything, but it's also the one thing that is going to always produce the same thing. The fluctuations come environmentally. So most of the time it's, hey, I got your light. I popped some seeds. Everything's dying. That's your light's fault. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Sure. Sometimes we can back off. We can change things. But a lot of times it's environmental. I mean, that's really trying to get people to understand that it is a weed. It's pretty easy to grow. It's not a terrible plant to grow, but to grow it well is difficult. It's a difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of love and time. And so people that pick it up as a quick hobby and like, I'm going to throw this in a tent, I'm going to be fine with it. Those are normally the ones with the biggest learning curve. But the nice thing, like I was saying about bringing in new growers to Scynce LED, and Scynce LED is we make a very complex light. If you're starting off, sometimes it's better to just go ahead and grab your Alibaba light, whatever China light you want, and just kind of get started there, and then move up to being able to do these tweaks and stuff like that. But it's environmental and it's too much light because everybody, especially these other LED boards on the market, and we just released our Kush Overdrive because everybody right now is asking for more light. So, once you're above 800, 900 ppfd, that's kind of in the normal range for beginner growers, organic growers. And a lot of these LEDs nowadays start you off at 1200, 1300. And you're driving a race car down the highway at 100 miles an hour. If anything goes wrong, it's going to go really wrong. You know what I mean? That's just your driver. So normally it's like, hey, let's start with 800 ppfd. Grow this first crop nice and slow. You're going to have a little more give, a little more ease to what you're trying to do. So throwing it in there, blasting the light, that's the biggest mistake people make.
I like that. I think that's something that happens. Or I think that analogy is there. Also, just because I got to circle back real quick, it kind of excited me to hear. I am in the middle of one of my commercial cultivation classes right now, Greg. In the first 3 weeks of this class, we don't talk about the plant at all. As a matter of fact, we spend the whole time talking about rules and regulations and lean. We talk about rules and lean is all we do in this first couple of weeks. I'm a big advocate of lean. I've been really trying to bring it into agriculture, into cannabis. I think it's kind of used, even though it's not always called that way. But then I have hours on people, right? I talk about people all the time because it is a huge part of it. And so I was really excited to just hear you talk about that because I think it's just that overlooked part. Everyone wants the plant, but the reality is the people are what you're going to spend the most money on. The people are going to be the human error is what's going to probably cause problems more than one of your other pieces of equipment. It's those people involved. You're not doing it all yourself at any level, right? If you're growing anything commercially, it's probably not just you that's doing those pieces. And so we have, I was just telling a story this morning about 2 cultivators. I won't name any names. One, both in Ohio, one which has had basically the same staff for the 4 years they've been open and is well regarded as one of the highest, noticed, talked about, reveled cultivators here, in one which has about 120% turnover, which everyone hates their product and doesn't like them, right? So it's their products are, the other product is better, but they're not that dissimilar. But really, their reputation alone, because of employees and Glassdoor ratings and Facebook posts, is what's hurting this cultivator. And the fact that this place has had the same people working as a crew for 4 or 5 years now. Like, they're down to a Scynce spelled the correct way, not Scynce LED. That's why I said CNC for that. It took me a while. You must know how many times I mistyped Scynce. I was just trying to figure out how to spell it your way.
I still do it. Yeah, no, I still do it to this day.
But stupid autocorrect when I was writing my notes kept saying science, and I'm like, no, I had to add it to my dictionary, so it quit telling me. But I think that's important.
Sync a lot too.
Sync a lot right there. I think it's important for the people for that. So I'd imagine working at Scynce LED, you've got a good set of team. Are you guys growing still? I mean, are we still in the early stages of Scynce LED, or do you think you kind of have what you're at, and now it's about getting it to the product? Like, where are you at as a company, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're still pretty young. You know, the cannabis industry is a unique beast, and then the lighting industry in the cannabis industry is a whole nother unique beast. You know, most of our competition is China. You know, I mean, 80-90% of it's China, and it's tough to beat the margins coming straight from over.
Exactly. Your only competition is China, and the only thing that they're competing on is price point.
Right, exactly.
And so, you know, it's just like, if you can get the customer to see past the price, there is no more tally for the Chinese. I mean, like, you know, Scynce LED, check here, and it's just down the line that way. And I think, you know, it is. I think it's with any industry and any business, you want to find the customers that you really enjoy working with, that really hold the same values, that really see the same, you know, vision for the future. And it's all, and I think that, you know, having a product that you stand behind that can actually be tweaked and grow with somebody is a lot easier to stand behind. It's a lot easier, you know, in the case of you know, it would be a lot easier for me to want to go to work for that company, knowing that they are future forward thinking in that capacity. What do you think is the coolest? What's the most exciting thing coming up for Greg after this? Is it Scynce LED for the next 20, or is it, you know, go on to you know, something else? What's the passion?
You got to figure out that moon ecology, right?
I'm going to dive into that one.
We got to catch those damn spiders. We got to go shot a ton of spiders up there. They're about to take out. Greg's got to be on the spider patrol like John.
I got to get on this thing. Yeah, I got to check and see where those are. They might still be up there. But I mean, I'm definitely with Scynce for the long term. I mean, we got a lot of new products coming down the line, and we even actually just have some really cool app updates that are coming out next week that I'm super stoked about, that are just going to make everybody's jobs a lot easier. IPM check mode, where the lights go automatically all white, so it's easier for you to search for bugs. You know, on maintenance mode stuff where you can dim the lights and spray. So I'm super excited about what we have going on at Scynce. I also do consulting still around the country, freelance. So I'm with a lot of the big grows still in different states around the country. You know, the Scynce is, you know, being on the research side has brought me in with, we're working with Bruce Bugby at Utah State University, which I mentioned earlier. We have a brand new research program working with him. He's got a bunch of our alphas working, so we're pulling apart, you know, phosphorus uptake, you know, how much light you need at night during versus the day, yada, 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 all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of cool research going on that side of things as well. So, you know, cannabis, man, that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be here until they either chase me out because it gets really bad, or I find a nice little dark hole to hide in and produce my top quality flower. But I mean,
just grow it in there off the ring. Yeah, take all your magic Scynce LEDs and just a room full of lights and Greg Selby in there. Well, Greg, thank you for joining us. I do have a question though. Just curious. I always try to ask all of our guests in here who work in the industry, you know, light aside, just what's coming down the road? Like, what do you think? We always hear interesting responses to what the next, say, 5 to 10 years holds for the cannabis industry. Some bold predictions, not stuff like legality and stuff, because that's neither here nor there, and we don't have control of it. But industry-wise, like, you go to trade shows, you're hearing from cultivators. You know, someone recently talked to us about nebulization of the product as far as an edible, using it on a micro level, not even combusting it in California. Like, what are some things you're hearing about? Like, what's behind the scenes that as we kind of wrap up here, that's like coming? What's exciting you that could be happening in the cannabis industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing that I'm seeing a lot of people kind of turning to now, as you kind of get to what you were just talking about, is getting away from the smokables. So we're seeing some really great technology coming online for the topicals. We're getting some really nice, like, you know, that makes it really accessible for everybody for pain relief, which, like I said, I've always been kind of medical, kind of patient based, which I get why a lot of people don't want to smoke that product. We were with some guys down in Oklahoma, actually. The guy used to work for Johnson & Johnson, and he's making these bath bombs and stuff that I'm telling you, I mean, normally when it comes to topicals, I kind of wave them away. I'm like,
it's a weird thing, right? They dominate CBD. They're totally CBD is dominated by topicals, salves, tinctures, but they're like a 2% or 1% of this THC Delta 9 market. And I don't know. I've had them a couple. They're a weird. It's a weird thing, right? I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, so I see that coming. And then yeah, I mean the extract market is going to be through the roof. Everybody is moving away. I mean, you're seeing a lot of these big producers realize how much money they're spending on trim. If they're not a machine trimming, how much trimmers are doing. So like this extract, this edible market is going to be huge, and it's going to make it more acceptable for everybody around the world. To not be smoking these products. So it's really in that non-smokable categories. I really see a ton of stuff going on, but I think it's just the science. We got a lot of science to figure out still on the endocannabinoid system. So there's a lot of science. It's educating our customers really is what I want to see come around. I don't want to see people buying plant-based products on THC percentages. It's not what we need in our industry. We need to get back to talking to people on a base level about what they can get from this plant that's not getting high. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I've always enjoyed it, but I see a lot more medical kind of coming back around long term.
No, I think absolutely the fiber material and all those things. I mean, from the industrial hemp side of it, I think that's where we're going. Thank you, Greg Selby, Scynce LED, SY. Oh, I knew I was going to do this. SCYNCE, ScynceLED.com. Got it into there. Also, something real quick, and we'll put the link down below. Like I saw you've started your own YouTube channel, kind of talking science. It's a deep dive, people. Like there's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of technical terms. Like you got to put on your smart boy pants and walk into these YouTubes with Scynce LED's YouTube channel. Subscribe, please. But there's some great stuff. I saw you just put one up the other day on literally, I think a couple days ago. So that's good stuff. Like it's high level stuff, but I think it's something that I kind of found myself in the way you explain it, Greg. Like I kind of get it. Like I'm not smart, but I kind of get what you're saying, and I just get excited. I get excited hearing you talk about it, and the fact, and Dustin's a very passionate fellow, so I can tell when he gets excited because of your passion. The way you speak and talk about it is exciting. So I'm really happy. Greg Selby from Scynce LED, ScynceLED.com. You're able to join us today, talk about this stuff. God, I still want to talk about the spiders, but I got to move on. I got to talk more. Got to sell this guy's lights for that. I'm just fascinated by spiders in space. That's all I want to talk about now is spiders in space. All I'm going to think about the rest of the day on today. Dustin, closing comments. I always feel like I steal them, but wrap up for me.
You know what? I want to wrap it right back around, right back to the people and say, if you really want to move fast, move alone. And if you really want to go far, move with others. And, I think that each of us kind of represent and embody that statement. So I'm pretty stoked that this was a great conversation today.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Greg. Everyone else, be sure to subscribe, wayward.media. Check out our website, Meet WM, MEET WM socially. Take care. Till next week, everybody.